How's it going, folks? Welcome back to the channel. It's a new look for the channel. I've moved back home. I'm in a pink room. It's a little bit feminine, but we'll run with it. What we won't run with is 100 days without a manager. That's what I'm talking about today. Let's get straight into it. So congratulations, you've made it through the last 100 days without a manager. Celtic, 100 days since Neil Lennon left, since he resigned, since he was sacked. Whichever way it happened 100 days ago, and Celtic do not have a manager. News moves quickly in the world. Sports moves very quickly. Football moves insanely fast. So I made a list of a couple of things that have happened within the last 100 days since Celtic have not had a manager. And bear in mind, this is just the things I could remember off the top of my head. There's loads of things that have happened that are not included on this list, but these are just the ones that have sprung to mind when it comes to the last 100 days since Celtic last had someone in charge of the football duties at the club. So Rangers obviously went on to win the league. St Johnstone went on to win the double. Roy Keane was favourite to get the Celtic job at one point in time. The Super League was founded. The Super League was disbanded. Manchester United fans stormed Old Trafford. Lille won the Ligue 1. Chelsea went from 8th in the league to Champions League winner. And bear in mind, they sacked their manager around about the same time as Celtic did. Enzo Maresca, who was linked with the Celtic job at one point in time, has gone on to get the Parma job. Jose Mourinho was sacked by Spurs. Antonio Conte won the Serie A with Inter Milan, then left Inter Milan. He's now favourite to get that Spurs job. Julian Nagelsmann was appointed as Bayern Munich boss for next season. Zidane left Real Madrid. Ancelotti has left Everton to join Real Madrid. The Eddie Howe deal, which was months and months in planning, fell through. Ange Postecoglou is now linked with the job. Postecoglou does not have a UEFA Pro license, so that has stalled. Fergal Harkin, who was again being pegged as the director of football for the last couple of months, was turned down by Celtic for the director of football role. And in a couple of weeks' time, Celtic start their preseason with about 4 weeks to go until their first preseason match against Sheffield Wednesday. So they go into that with no Celtic manager. They go into that with no director of football. They go into that with their captain leaving the club, their top goal scorer probably leaving the club, their best defender probably leaving the club, and no sign of anything happening within the club. And we're done. 100 days without a Celtic manager. It's amazing that we have gotten to this point. It's amazing that we've gotten to the stage where I would be saying 100 days since Celtic got rid of Neil Lennon, or Neil Lennon left Celtic, and they still have not assigned anybody the role of manager. So let's talk about Eddie Howe, because this is the first video that I've done in a while. So Eddie Howe, the deal was there and getting over the line and almost there and waiting for Bournemouth staff and waiting for a couple of people. And then it falls through. Listen, none of us know really what happened within the board when this decision was made. None of us know what it was down to, really. I mean, we're being told it was down to a staffing issue. We're being told that it was down to certain things that Eddie Howe wanted at the club and the club couldn't make happen. But what the main point I would make about this is that this is months in the making, and yet Celtic did not have a backup option by the looks of it. I mean, they'll say that Ange was the backup option. They'll say that, they had him already interviewed and ready to go. But in reality, if they had him lined up as the second option, the UEFA issues that he's now having would not be happening, because he would have put the paperwork through and he would be ready to take the Celtic job straight away. So what this screams off is the hubris that has run through Celtic for the last couple of years of the deal, assuming the deal is done because you're Celtic Football Club, assuming that Eddie Howe is taking the job because you're Celtic Football Club, and not being aware enough to know that a top level manager is not going to take the job unless his demands are made. Especially with Crystal Palace knocking about, with Everton knocking about now. A top level manager who's going to get a club, who's going to pay him more and give him who he wants as his staff, is not going to take the job, because Neil Lennon took that job because he had no other option. Neil Lennon took that job with John Kennedy as assistant and Strachan as his backup head coach because he had nowhere else to go, because Celtic was the best job that he can possibly get. That's why he took the job. That's why you were able to get Neil Lennon for that. You are not going to get Eddie Howe without getting him his staff. You're not going to get Eddie Howe without meeting his demands. You're not going to get Eddie Howe if the structure does not suit what Eddie Howe wants. That is plain and simple. That is clear as day to anybody, not even people who work within football, to people who work outside of football and just follow football. They know the top level coaches are not going to go for that. But Celtic ploughed on with their hubris, thinking Eddie Howe was going to get the job. And months down the line, when their demands were not met, he did not take the job. And now Ange Postecoglou is being linked with the job, but he can't take the job yet because he does not have a UEFA Pro license, so he has to put the paperwork through. And I do want to say straight out the bat, I'm not going to pretend to know who Ange Postecoglou is. I'm going off the sources from Australia. I'm going off what I've read about him. I'm going off what I've watched in terms of his clubs. And he does play very attractive football. He does seem to be highly respected. And within all of Australian football circles, he is widely regarded as the best Australian coach to have coached ever in the country, which you have to give some credit to. However, there's a big difference between coaching in Australia and coaching in Celtic and coaching in Glasgow. Australia does have a big football culture, but rugby and Aussie rules are bigger than football. Japan has a massive football following within the country, but again, it's Japanese football. And I don't want to be too disrespectful towards those leagues because in their own right, they are good leagues. But the pressure that comes with managing a club in Glasgow, just look at what Ronnie Dyla was saying. The melting pot that Glasgow is not for the faint-hearted. The melting pot of Glasgow is for a strong character who's going to come in and know what his ideals are. And it seems like Ange Postecoglou knows what his ideals are. It seems that he has a very set way of playing. And if he is the next Celtic manager, I will be fully behind him. And I do believe that if it goes well, if he can make that step up, if he can handle the pressure, if he can handle everything that comes with managing Celtic Football Club, then I think he would be a massive success. But it is a huge risk. And I know it's not the same thing, but I just have the example of a club that managed to put a guy in charge who didn't have UEFA Pro license. So it was Dundalk in the League of Ireland, essentially. So what happened with that was they sacked their manager. They brought in this guy who nobody had heard of, Filippo Giovagnoli. He was managing in the US, didn't have a UEFA Pro license. Suddenly Dundalk are playing in Europe, so they need their manager to have a UEFA Pro license. So what they did was they took their head coach, who happened to have a UEFA Pro license, and appointed him as manager. So he was appointed as manager. Giovagnoli was downgraded to head coach. However, everything in the background, it was Giovagnoli managing the club, and the head coach was just the front man for it. It was a disaster. So it worries me that Celtic, and that was a basket case of a club, like they're being run by American owners who haven't a clue what they're doing, Dundalk. So it worries me now that Celtic are being run with the same sort of, people who assume that this is how you do it, and they're just wrong. It's amazing how wrong the Celtic board have been over the last couple of months, over the last couple of years. And it's been really embarrassing for the club. And that's the damage, that's the impact that you have when you're managing a brand, a club like Celtic, that these things have real world impacts. These things, I mean, if you think about the season, yes, in footballing terms, it was an absolute disaster in terms of Bolingoli and Dubai, and on the pitch, it was an absolute shit show. But that has real world impacts on going forward for Celtic as well. It's not just that season. It impacts the season going forward, because if you're a manager and you're thinking, okay, this club's going through a whole lot of changes, you're not going to take the job because it's a massive risk. And now that Celtic are going through those changes and they just can't seem to make those changes happen, that's a direct impact of the season that has passed us. That's a direct impact of the negative press that Celtic have received, of the embarrassment of having to tweet. Imagine being the social media manager who had to tweet about season tickets going on sale and saying that they wished that they had a manager appointed at this point. That's not their fault. It's not the social media manager's fault that Celtic don't have a manager yet. but they are the ones that take the flack. They are the ones that are impacted by the lack of knowledge within this board, the lack of, just wherewithal within the Celtic board to get a deal over the line for a manager and plan ahead. Planning ahead just seems to be something that the Celtic board just don't seem to do. And the problem with planning ahead at the minute is that they're planning ahead. I'll take Stephen Welsh's contract, for example. They're planning ahead with that. They're giving him a contract. But what happens if the manager comes in and they don't want him? And then you're thinking, director of football. How can you make a decision on a manager without the director of football? The director of football makes the management decision. He appoints the head coach that they want because it's supposed to work within a structure. It's not supposed to be you have a manager and you have a director of football and they discuss things. Take PSG, for example. They are the prime example of a club that has gotten the director of football structure wrong. Leonardo is the director of football and the board essentially appoint managers who don't work within a director of football structure. And they come to loggerheads. It happened with Emery, it happened with Tuchel, and it's happening now with Mauricio Pochettino. So what you do is you get your director of football in charge, and the director of football appoints the head coach, and the director of football appoints the head of scouting, and all of those guys work together in tandem. And I just don't understand how Celtic can be 2 weeks off preseason, 4 weeks off the first game of the season in terms of the preseason games. And they don't have a manager, they don't have a director of football, they don't have a captain, they're losing their top goal scorer, they're losing their best defender, and we're 100 days now without a manager, 100 days down the road. So it's incredibly frustrating. And I really hope if Ange gets the job, I really hope he's a success. I will get behind him if he does get the job, and I really hope that it turns out well. But I am not confident because of the way that the club is still being run. It's unbelievable how people can get to that level of board level and board management and just seem to not have a clue what they're doing. So incredibly frustrating. That's the first video for a good while. It might not be as consistent because obviously I'm in Donegal, so who knows what my Wi-Fi is going to be like here every now and then. So I will try upload a couple of videos every week or a video every week to keep going because I mean there's endless things to talk about in the last 100 days. So I will continue. Hopefully you'll like this video. If you did like this video and you want to watch more, just hit the subscribe button below and you get notified every single time a video goes live. Leave a comment below as well if you have any thoughts on Ange, if you have any thoughts in the last 100 days, if you have any thoughts on what should actually happen in Celtic, just drop a comment below and I'll try to get back to all of you as well. We'll chat to you later.